If you're a Kanye West fan, you're not a fan of me, you're a fan of yourself. You will believe in yourself. I'm just the espresso. I'm just a shot in the morning to get you going, to make you believe that you can overcome that situation that you're dealing with all the time.
I believe that everybody should have the opportunity to share their views, however noble or odious.
There is nothing bigger or older than the universe. The questions I would like to talk about are: 1. Where did we come from? How did the universe come into being? Are we alone in the universe? Is there alien life out there?
God who created this universe, if it was created by God, is quite clearly a maniac. Utter maniac. Totally selfish.
The people who are stuck in an image, the people who are stuck and afraid to be honest and dream a big dream. Dream big and dare to fail. I dare you to do that, because this is living proof that it is possible to make a dream come true.
Yeah, man, all good. Like I said, trying to fight the boredom of quarantine.
Yeah, what? Yeah, I mean, you're a massive music fan, right? So you like thriving on the live scene. And I've got so many questions about your opinions of live gigs at the moment, especially because I think you go to mostly smaller ones, mostly independent bands, mostly up and coming bands, and I want to know a lot of your opinions on the big guns, so to speak. But what's your take on, what's your biggest concern moving out of this, mate? Is it that like people aren't going to go to public events for a while? What are your thoughts? What do we learn from this, do you think, after this period?
So I was talking before we went on lockdown. I was talking about this with a mate because it was when everything was getting cancelled. So we were talking about it, and I had sort of two opinions on what might happen. So one was that it's going to cause like a resurgence in people going to like smaller shows and local shows because there's been nothing on. People are going to go to whatever they can, you know, because they want to get back into entertainment, basically, which would be really cool.
Even with the risk of another peak, if that happens.
Yeah, see, that's the thing as well. Like it has to be given the all clear, but I feel like once the all clear has been given, like I think people might seek out that entertainment more and go to smaller shows. But then the other side of that is that there's possibly going to be an oversaturation. You know, there's all these bands, especially like the bigger bands, who have had to cancel tours and stuff. So they'll be rescheduled, hopefully. So you'll have all these artists and stuff going out all at once, and it's possibly an oversaturation. So people just won't notice the smaller ones because they'll only see the bigger ones going like, oh, this is our like Corona comeback tour.
Sure, yeah. So I guess that'll be the same for like when I imagine they'll be rushing all the films out as well, right? Like just pushing them all out. Like everything was delayed. We need to get these out. These have been ready to go for like 3 weeks. We need to get them in the cinema or get them out as soon as possible on streaming services.
Yeah, that's the thing. I wonder how many are going to go straight to streaming. Because
a few already have.
Didn't Disney Plus put a few of their sort of, I guess, less risky ones? Didn't they put them straight on streaming rather than cinema?
I just know that they put on a few of their latest cinema releases early on Disney Plus as well, like Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, right.
So that's and obviously the streaming service has had it couldn't have been a much better situation for them to launch in this sort of particular period in the UK, because at the moment everyone's thinking about how to entertain themselves via a TV streaming service. So Disney Plus in that respect seem to have launched in a very good window.
Oh yeah, I've been using Disney Plus more than Netflix at the moment.
Right. Have you watched The Mandalorian?
I haven't seen it all. I through questionable methods, I watched it when it came out in America, but it wasn't available in Europe yet. So I watched like the first 4 episodes. But I haven't actually picked it back up since, it's kind of all out here now.
Not a good sign.
I thought it was pretty good. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Can you describe it to me, because I haven't seen it yet?
Yeah, I haven't seen any of it. I can give you. I'll try to give you like a spoiler-free, like, of what I remember. So it's
I can't imagine a Star Wars TV show.
So what I thought it was going to be was that kind of like an actual like a series, like it follows this character and then there's like development, so like a Breaking Bad or whatever. You know what I mean? There's like a whole world with like characters and stuff, but it's more like a Western TV show that's real episodic in like a kind of X-Files way, or what was that show? Oh my god, I can't remember what it is. It was like this old sci-fi show that was like episodic. I've completely like blanked on the name. But yeah, each episode.
Firefly?
What's that?
Firefly?
No, not Firefly. It's like really old. Futurama parodied it with the scary door. I literally can't remember what it's called. Anyway, but it's like each episode is kind of self-contained. So there is this like overarching thing with like the Mandalorian, and he's got this like baby Yoda, and there's something going on with this, but at the same time, there's not really, from what I saw in the first few episodes, there's not really a lot of returning characters. It's all like standalone, like go do this, and then he does it, and then he comes back, and then they're like, oh, go do this in the next episode. So he goes and does that, and then he comes back, and then it just kind of goes like that. Right. Like each one's a mission kind of thing.
Yeah,
but again, I haven't finished it, so it might not be like that the whole way through.
And what did you think of it?
I thought it was good. Like, it looks real good. It was like flashy Star Wars for sure. Like the way they kind of did like Solo and Rogue One.
That's good.
It looks real good. And it's like, in terms of tone, it's kind of dark, but again, it's still like a Western. So there's some like, and it's still Disney. So it's got some like light-hearted bits to it for sure.
One of my issues with Game of Thrones was that even though the budget was extortionate by the end, I always felt that those types of stories could never truly be told to the scale they need to be in the TV show format, because the budget was so demanding. Obviously Disney has a huge budget, but was there any point in this where you thought, oh yeah, okay, they've got a 20-minute dialogue scene here, because realistically they're not going to be able to afford a Star Wars like movie budget for every episode of the show?
From what I remember, I watched it like maybe like 6 months ago. From what I remember, there were like those scenes, but they weren't put in to like pad it out. Everything seemed necessary. I mean, there wasn't really much filler going on. It was all sort of.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, moving back to the music thing then, Ben. You're a big fan. You go to a lot of. So you were doing a lot of music journalism. Mm-hmm. You were following bands, and then you did create a. I don't even know the official word for it. An event platform, event
promotions
hosting
company.
Promotions company, and that was awesome. And so I want to get your latest opinions on any bands that you've seen at an arena, at a stadium level. Any comments you have of their stage show, the vibe of it, their performance, and kind of the future of live performance and music in general, really.
In terms of like big shows, probably the best in terms of production. So I don't really go to as many sort of massive shows. So you've probably seen, so I know you go to like some huge shows. So in terms of what I've seen, probably some of the best that do it in terms of production are probably like Enter Shikari are real good. They
At an arena level?
Yeah, so I saw them at the Cardiff Motorpoint. And obviously on that tour they did like Ali Pali and stuff. But I've seen them twice at the Motorpoint now. And both times they've had like massive screens. They've like utilized their own sort of speaker setup for like, it's like quadraphonic 3D sound or something. But they've, there's like so much technology involved in it. It's crazy.
Do you actually notice the difference when they use all of these different technology types?
For sure. I remember when they were testing the kick drum during their line check or sound check. And who supported? It was the Wonder Years, I think, were on before. And then I remember them like sound checking, and they were just like doing a kick through like a normal like mic, and it was like as standard. It was pretty loud like in an arena, but it was just as standard. And then they were checking Shikari's kit through all these speakers. I remember they tested the kick, and it made everyone in the room go like, what the fuck? It was huge. Like, their sound was real good. So the way it worked was they had like two, I'm not sure what they're called. Do you know when you got like the big speakers that kind of curve from the ceiling? I'm not sure what that kind of stack is called. But they had two of those at the front, and then they had two of those behind the sound desk as well, like hanging from the ceiling. So if you were in that kind of square, then the sound was like fucking amazing.
So they had two facing towards the stage?
Yeah. So you were kind of like in this cube of like sound.
Right. Wow. Okay. And what was it? I'm a big fan of Shikari, some of Shikari's albums, and I've pretty much stopped following them now. Mm-hmm. But was it full? Are they? I know I'm ignorant to this, but are they still very, very, very popular? Or because when I'm gauging things off things like Spotify, you think, oh my god, like Shikari only have this many followers, and it doesn't matter. But it's interesting to see, because if you went from a cult point of view, from a fan point of view, every like Shikari album is such a big Shikari fan. Sorry, every Shikari fan is such a big fan that they'd go to like every live tour, every live show.
So when I saw them the first time in Cardiff, that was when they were touring the Minesweep, which is their fourth album.
They did Motorpoint Arena for that.
Yeah, that was their first ever arena tour, and I'm pretty sure it sold out. If it didn't, it was very close to. And then they came back, it must have been like 18 months later or whatever, with the Spark, and it definitely wasn't as full. And then they played, I think it was December just gone, maybe the year before. But the last time they played Cardiff, basically, they played Tramshed, which is not an arena. It's like 1,000 cap, whereas Motorpoint's like 3,000, I think. Okay. So, yeah, they went down, but I don't know if they were going for that.
Did they play lower capacity? Yeah, or right. Yeah, I mean, how do they get... I always wondered, do you know how they gauge the numbers? Is it just by single sold, album sold?
What kind of tour area they can do?
Yeah.
I don't know, yeah, I guess it'd just be looking at their figures, and they'd probably, I think perhaps not so much now, but I think Shikari around that time of like the Minesweep and like Flash Flood, between those two albums, I think they were one of the biggest UK like rock bands, or at least more kind of metal type bands.
For sure.
So it doesn't surprise me that they could do that. And Architects did the same thing. I saw Architects last year in January, and I think that might have been their first full arena tour. I think so, don't quote me on that, but that's the first time I've seen them on that like massive stage. So I think you just kind of know. I think you can just gauge from like, I guess now it's all streams and stuff, but you can just gauge from your popularity. And when you're selling out like the smaller rooms, you can probably think, well, if we sold out this room relatively quickly, we could probably upgrade it next time.
Yeah. It's interesting because, again, my ignorance says that I'm surprised that bands like Shikari and Architects are, still maintaining, let alone growing, especially amongst this generation of new music fans, i.e. the younger peeps, who are, without sounding so ageist and old and righteous, they are definitely seemingly less enthusiastic about a particular artist and more perhaps about particular albums or songs and who's good and great in the current, second, rather than looking at a wider scope of music. That being said, of course, again, I'm pretty biased, and what do I know about a 12-year-old's taste in music? But from what I gauge from the festival lineup changes over the years, it seems that the demand for headliners being the here and now rather than we've done it, we've grown to this, i.e. Shikari, is a bit shocking to me and in a way insulting, because when I see a band like Shikari play 4 sets or whatever it was, 5 sets at Reading and Leeds last year or the year before, and then I see, Billie Eilish, and I get that she is probably the biggest pop star in the world
I
right
think
now.
she had like
I
the biggest crowd of all time at Reading or something.
Wow, so that's nuts. So I mean, maybe that justifies it, but in my mind, I always thought that headline slot was always saved for the people who had kind of earned their way to it, rather than they've sold this, they've been streamed 3 billion times, they get it. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe it always has been about.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been like a shift, because I think when you look at all the bands that have headlined Reading in the past, sort of like, I guess, say from like 2000 onwards, when it really started like getting massive, it was always like just these big bands that you would probably only see on a show like that. So I don't know if they have done it, but someone like Metallica, you know what I mean? You'd only see them on like a massive stage like that. But recently, I think the first time they did it was the only time I've been to Reading, is when they had 2 headliners on one day, and they had Paramore and Queens of the Stone Age.
Right.
Oh, we went together, didn't we? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I didn't go that year.
No,
I didn't go that year.
Yeah, but it's Paramore and Queens of the Stone Age. And then since then, I think every year they've had at least one day where it's been 2 headliners, which I think kind of shows... Paramore and Queens of the Stone Age both kind of came up in the 2000s, where that kind of rock music, they came from different subgenres, I guess, but that kind of music was big in the 2000s. But then in 2014, neither of those bands, who are undeniably both huge, couldn't hold the festival headline slot by themselves. And I think now the organisers have leaned into that, and I think because bands or like artists now, so you get like pop artists and stuff, I think they come through with like, maybe like a massive song or like a massive album, and then they don't necessarily keep it going. So I don't think they have that fan base to support that. So I don't think any of the you're not really going to get any of the old icons anymore so much. I think a lot of artists now, a lot of them maybe seem more like flash in the pan. Some of them hold on to it. Someone like Post Malone or something has held on to it. Someone like Drake or whatever can like hold on to it. Yeah. But you get someone like, I think Lil Pump was there like this year or last year, and he had like, I'm not a fan, don't get me wrong, but I can only name like 2 songs from like a casual perspective, which is Gucci Gang, and then that one he did with Kanye. And he had like a pretty high up slot at Reading, and I don't think he's going to play Reading again.
Yeah, for sure, man. See, that's why I love talking about music with you, because you have such knowledge. It's so insightful to discuss things with you. Well, because I'm now thinking of, one of the main issues I've had with Download Festival is the fact that, as you kind of mentioned, they put the same, 8 to 12 bands on every year, right? And we need some fresh blood. We need some bands to take the headline stage. Now, one of the solutions may just be what Reading and Leeds have done, which I've condemned them for since doing it, which is share the headline slot. And maybe that isn't as ridiculous as it seems. Maybe there's some tradition there for metalheads where it's like, no, you have a headliner. That's how it goes. We're not going to flex with that. So maybe that's why Download doesn't. But I feel, because I just look at the lineups, dude, and I just think, again, maybe this is me getting really old, and there is definitely new music that I love. But I know that when you go on that journey of growing up as a teenager, there's so much music to discover. It's like a wealth of fortune. And there's so many bands to listen to. It's like this, one of the best journeys you'll ever have. But then you get to where I think I am now. I won't speak for you, but where I am now, where the most interesting music I think I can listen to now is probably any that I write, because I'm just at that point now where I feel that I've listened to almost everything that's going to make me, a star, 10 out of 10 masterpiece. That being said, there's definitely a few albums that creep through and I listen to and I think, wow, I can't believe I haven't listened to this yet. No Doubt was a band for me a few years ago, which I discovered for the first time, and I just love their catalogue now. But when I look at festival lineups, I can't help but think look, again, Billie Eilish, I get it. You, again, made some insightful comments on her image and how that was created, and I thought that was really fascinating. And her history with her brother as a producer.
Yeah.
But I can't help but look at that and go, okay, I'm definitely think this, this girl has something to say. But then I also think that a lot of it, has been smart marketed. So then in that respect, it's like, will she end up being a headliner? Will she sustain her trajectory? I don't know.
I think she did headline.
But then I listened to the album.
I think she did headline this year.
Is
she headline or is she sub-headline?
I think she was like third or fourth.
Yeah, I suppose she was earlier. Oh well.
But yeah, maybe she's sub. I don't know, but. It's interesting because when I listen to the album, I'm like, I get it, but I don't really get it. And I also think there is an argument to say, this is really difficult. And I think, you rightfully go for the popularity side, but it's like, can't we get someone who's really good rather than really popular? I guess that's not how the music industry works, but I'm not saying Billie Eilish isn't good.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like Billie Eilish is one of those, like, she's in the middle of that Venn diagram where she's really popular, but she is also really good as well.
Yeah.
Whereas I go back to like someone like Lil Pump, like, at least from the stuff I've heard, like, he's popular, sure, but he's not good by like any definition, to be honest.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's like when you listen to old rap songs and you see all the features and you're like, all right, yeah, of course they were a thing, I guess. 15 years ago, that's why they got the feature or whatever. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that I feel for festival lineups because I look at them now and I have no real desire to go there for whatever reason. Maybe that I'm not bothered about seeing the band live. Maybe about mostly the main reason I don't go to Reading and Leeds is because I feel that the audience is beyond my comprehension now in terms of age and culture. If I go there, I will feel like I'm out of place and uncomfortable and not enjoying myself.
Yeah, so I feel like that with both Reading and Download for like opposite reasons. So I probably wouldn't go to Reading again because it doesn't appeal to me because, I don't know, in a sense I feel like maybe I'm too old for it or like I'm just not into the music they put on now. But then with Download, like you were saying, they put on the same headliners and the same bands, and they're bands that maybe I once listened to, but like I don't anymore. I just don't care. And they keep putting these bands on and not necessarily giving a massive platform to the newer bands. And then, but I was thinking then when you were talking about sort of with Download putting on newer bands, a lot of people. I remember once I read something or I heard someone say that it's around the age of like 25 you stop looking for new music. As like a general person, you stop looking for music at 25. So you think of the bands that headline Download, stuff like that, Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, Aerosmith, Rage Against the Machine as well for this year. All their fans, for the most part, are going to be over that line. So they're not really looking for other bands, not actively searching, but they'll still follow the other bands. So I think to big up the smaller bands for stuff like Download, it will take those sort of older bands to big them up. So for example, there's a band coming through at the moment called Loathe, and they're like a metalcore, new metal type crossover. They're not really like bound by anything. They're just sick. But their new album has some softer moments that are very sort of Deftones-esque. And Chino from Deftones, when they released one of the singles before the album came out, and it sounds exactly like one of Deftones' albums. It's the one with the like Japanese title. But yeah,
Koni Yoken.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. Chino basically shouted him out. Yeah, Chino shouted him out on Twitter, and it got him like loads of attention. And now every time I see Loathe, I see people mention Deftones in the same breath. And Loathe are getting massive. Unfortunately, the coronavirus has stunted their album cycle, but they managed to do a tour beforehand, and it was like really successful. So,
yeah, you make a great point, mate. I think it will take, and that's where the importance of support slots come in, right? And that's where my infuriation of poor support bands or poor suitability comes in, especially with the production and mixing of the music live. You mentioned Shikari. Obviously, I think bands should absolutely. I don't know what the setup is in terms of, do they use their own gear? Do they use the main band's gear? I don't know, but the amount of times I've gone to a arena gig and the support bands come on and it's like, are the speakers turned on? Like, what is going on here? And then they want to save some of the stage show for the main band. Again, get that. There is an argument to say that a real great band doesn't need any lights, I guess, so to speak. But the importance of the support band shouldn't be amiss here, where, when I go see Metallica, I should see the next big and up-and-coming type of band. And the band that, when I saw them last, was Ghost, and they are really up-and-coming. If not, I think they were planning to do an arena tour this year or next year.
I think they played Cardiff earlier in the year.
Right, yeah. So they're well on their way, so to speak. And I just get frustrated when I see, Muse and Dizzy Rascals supporting. And I'm like, don't get me wrong, I had a great time with Dizzy Rascal, okay? But then you see like Biffy Clyro support Muse in France, and you're like, yeah, great, it makes sense. Why didn't we have that? It makes no sense whatsoever for Dizzy Rascal to support Muse. I'm sorry. It just doesn't make any sense. And again, saw Cavail Attack, I think is how you pronounce the name, from Metallica a few years ago. And I don't like their music, but they put so much effort into their performance that I really respect them now. And I won't let anyone trash talk them if they try. But the support slot for me has kind of lost its way a bit as well. And there's a lot of collaboration tours happening as well, especially within the metal genre to try and the pop punk genre to try and keep popularity going. I think I think that Green Day tour in the US was planned for this year, and that was a great move. With Green Day, Weezer, I think, and some other pop punk
Fall Out Boy and stuff. Yeah,
Fall Out Boy. Yeah. So even though Fall Out Boy, I guess, aren't really pop punk anymore, but we'll move on. But it's kind of shame. It's a sad state of affairs when most people really, really, really don't want to see the support band, because most of the time, I'm not being funny, they're not amazing. So I think you've definitely hit the spot there where you say the future up and coming bands need the support. I think.
I think on those big shows.
How do you think?
And so with support bands on like smaller shows, like club shows, generally, that is sort of the same level of exposure for them. But I don't know, a lot of the times on these smaller shows, they will be like up and coming bands. And a lot of shows I go to now, I will go for support bands rather than headliners. Because that tends to be the only way you can sort of see them if they don't live in your area.
Would you stay for the headliner?
Yeah, I'd stay. I think in recent memory, the only time I haven't stayed for a headliner is a band called Issues did a UK tour, and they took out this band Lotus Eater as support, and they're like a hardcore band from Scotland. And I've seen them before, but they were saying, I want to see them again, but I really don't care for Issues. So I bought tickets and I just went for Lotus Eater. I didn't stay for Issues. That was the only time I think I've left a headline slot.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you see a band supersede another band, and you'll see what I mean in a second. What are your thoughts on that? So when Bring Me or Shikari support Bring Me, and I think there's a perspective there which says, hold on a minute, should that be that way round?
Mm-hmm. I think it's good.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's good. There was a tour. I can't remember who it was. I can't remember who actually headlined it, but it was Knocked Loose toured America with Terror, and Terror on support, and Terror are like I think they came up in like the 90s and the 2000s, but they're basically one of these like old guard hardcore bands that people still turn out to see just because they're really good. But then Knocked Loose were like, they still are. They're like the new hotness. They're what everyone's listening to in that genre now. So like Knocked Loose toured, and then Terror were on support, and people, I think, said to Scott Vogel, the singer of Terror, they were like, what the fuck, why aren't Knocked Loose supporting you? And he said, like, well, they're the new hotness, like, people are turning out for them. People will come to our shows, I guess, if they're fans, but like ultimately, if Knocked Loose are headlining, they're going to bring more people, and we just want to play. So
fair. There definitely seems to be a sense of humility in rock and metal and whatever you want to call it, compared to the rap game, and I get frustrated with it, especially because I know the live shows aren't nearly as good most of the time. So I hear, so I've seen. Don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think you can get the egos for sure. I feel like egos exist everywhere, but I don't know. I don't really follow like rap that much, but a lot of the times when artists like that come on my radar, they're already established.
Yeah,
and a lot of the time they come from the internet now, from what I perceive. So they just sort of like make it big with like one song. Don't get me wrong, there's grafters for sure. There's definitely grafters out there. But I don't know. I feel like with like metal and stuff and rock music, you put the hours in the van. You know what I mean? You're traveling around. You're like properly grafting for it. It's earned. But like I said, I'm not disparaging like hip hop artists at all, because I know that there's graft there for sure. You can't just do it. I couldn't become a famous rapper just because I know how to use Logic or whatever. Like there's definitely a skill to it, and there's graft, but I don't know. I think like the fame happens quicker if you catch it.
Yeah. And I guess there is an argument to say that they get fame because there is the ego there, and they're attractive to watch and listen to. Oh yeah,
that's the difference as well. Funny to... Like it's one man, so or one person. So if that person, is a character, is good to watch, is good in the media or whatever, then yeah, they're going to get famous quicker. And you've got to have some extent of an ego to be that kind of like, look at me kind of thing on stage.
Yeah. What's the best band you've seen at an arena status? And the Shikari, from a production point of view, but would you say they're your favourite band show that you've seen?
On a big level? Yeah, that show they did for the Minesweep was real good. Sorry, who else have I seen at the Motorpoint? I saw Architects. They were real good. They sounded really good.
Is there a concern, Ben, that a band like Architects won't be able to go to their 70s because it's physically undoable, not possible from a vocal point of view?
Yeah, possibly. I think that style, unless you change, I think Bring Me sort of caught that, which is why Bring Me aren't as like shouty or whatever anymore. Actually, I saw...
Oh, you think that's one of the main drivers?
Yeah, I think so. You can hear Ollie Sykes try do like Uncleans now when he tries to do some of the older songs, and sometimes he hits it, but sometimes he doesn't, and when he doesn't, it doesn't sound so great, which I think is a lot of why they've moved towards that kind of singing direction. Not just for that, but also, for longevity in their band, they've adapted, and I think it's not my thing anymore, but I respect what they're doing, and I think they're doing it right.
Interesting, because I don't. I feel that they made one step too quickly, and I feel that there should be an album in between, say, Sempiternal and oh god,
That's the Spirit.
That's the Spirit, yeah. And it seems like a bit much for Turn for me, kind of, like a rock band, then using synthesizers, suddenly that kind of contrast.
Yeah, I think I agree. I remember saying that when the album came out. One thing, I don't really listen to That's the Spirit anymore. I never really vibed with it that much. But I remember they dropped Drown as like a standalone single between the two. And I remember people saying, like, is this what the new album's going to sound like? And I remember Bring Me saying, if Drown ends up on the new album, then they failed. I don't know what they meant by that, whether they wanted to go even more poppy or whether they wanted to keep it heavy. But Drown did end up on the album.
Right.
So I don't know if because Drown was like a massive hit for them, especially from their sort of, Sempiternal really got them massive attention. And then they went for like more sort of alt rock sound. And then, they did really well for them. So I imagine they probably just leaned into that because it was successful. So in that sense, I don't think they did miss a step. I think they saw an opportunity and they took it. But if Drown hadn't have come out, I do wonder what That's the Spirit would have sounded like.
For sure. What do you think about the current state of Green Day? What do you think about the latest album?
Green Day.
Because you're a big Green Day fan, right? Well, you grew up on Green Day.
Green Day were like that first band. It was like the standard, like Green Day, Blink-182. Yeah. Probably before that was Busted, but I think Green Day was when I was like, actual rock music.
Band. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I haven't really been massive on Green Day since the trilogy came out. I wasn't ever that big on that. Not 21st was Revolution Radio I thought was a really good album. It had some like stinkers on it, but for the most part I thought it was good.
I never managed to listen to it. I just got put off by that Bang Bang single.
Really? So I really like Bang Bang.
Going to be my cup.
Bang Bang was what made me think like, oh, fucking right, Green Day are like back. They're not doing the trilogy thing anymore. There's one song that comes to mind on that album, Revolution Radio, that I really don't like, and it's Outlaws. It's just really boring. It's just mid-tempo, just boring. Like, it's just real shit. But then like the best song on the album is, I think it's the last song. It's called like Somewhere Now or something. It's one of those typical Green Day songs that's in like 3 or 4 different movements, and it's like a return to form. It's real good. But then the new album, I got put off by the first single, and I haven't bothered to look at it.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't heard amazing things. Now that you mentioned the 3/4 movement thing, it makes me laugh because they almost put in a metal-like progressiveness to having different parts of the same song, but in a pop-punk formula. And things like Jesus of Suburbia, when you think about it, was pretty genius in that respect.
Yeah, that's a pretty especially in like their genre, it's definitely like a next level kind of thing. Especially when you think of what they were doing before. I think the album before American Idiot was Warning, and that kind of went in a way almost like folky, but there was nothing like crazy like out there on it, to be honest. But yeah, I think American Idiot definitely like changed the game in that respect.
Yeah, for sure, man.
I've been going back lately. My favorite Green Day album at the moment is Insomniac.
Okay.
I've just been going back. It's like, obviously it's the follow-up to Dookie, and I just think it's a really interesting album to look at, because I remember when they released Dookie, everyone was like, oh, they sold out or whatever, and then they released Insomniac as like a fuck you. And it's like their heaviest album. It's sick.
People thought Dookie was a sellout. Wow.
Yeah, it was their like major label debut. It was their like first one that blew up.
Okay. Crikey. Okay, right. Interesting, because I think looking back, you would always just see that as good music rather than sell out. I guess that's people's
It's where they
differentiation,
came
isn't
from.
it?
They came up in that like California hardcore and punk scene. So
yeah, okay. So Ben, going back to your promotional organization,
my short-lived promotion career. Yeah.
Well. We don't know what's going to happen in the future,
that's
Ben.
true.
What was your favorite part about that period of your life?
So ultimately, the thing is, we had it, but the way it worked out, I was only ever involved in putting on like 3 shows, so I can't really give like a full overview of it. But my favorite thing, I think, was, I don't know, just feeling like you're cultivating that local scene. I remember the first show we did, we started it because there was a band from around like Aberdeen way called Do Trips, who were kind of just like emo-y, twinkly type stuff. They're really good. But it started because me and Harry, who I did it with, shout out to Harry.
Shout out.
He wanted to bring them down, and then I liked them too, and I was like, oh, I'll help you out. So that's basically how it started. We started this company because we wanted to bring this band from Scotland down to Cardiff. And the first show was really good. We put it on a Monday night, which is, as you can imagine, the worst night to put a gig on. But it did really well. We got like 60 people through the door in this like 75 cap venue. Yeah, and it was just really, really good. Really.
How do you ensure those people walk through the door, or set it up so that there is a high probability they will walk through the door?
So the main thing is the bands you're putting on. They'd never played Cardiff before, and we didn't realise sort of how big a following they had down here. We were surprised by how successful it was. I'm not going to lie. But so the support bands we chose, we had some like local bands that we knew could get people to shows. So one of the bands on there was Foxbite, who they're from like Hereford. So it's like mid Wales. It's in England, but it's like mid Wales, that level. They always have really good pull. They're good at getting people to shows. And then the band Scavengers, they always put on a good show. So we just like chose the support bands that we knew would bring the people. And then we also did some kind of like marketing, if you want to call it that, marketing campaigns where we could offer like, I think the tickets were £5 on the door, or you could get guest list for £3 if you posted a picture of your dog in the event.
Oh,
so
cool.
Because it was so easy for people to come to this cheap show, we had like loads on the guest list, and then I think pretty much everyone that came through was evidently coming through for the show had guest lists. But then we also had a few like punters in the bar, so it's just people that heard what was going on through the door and then bought a ticket there and then.
Nice. And did people enjoy the show or shows?
For the most part, yeah. I didn't hear any negative feedback. I guess it's not really like, what we do is we make sure it runs smoothly. It's not our job to entertain.
Yeah.
So, but,
yeah. Would there, in terms of running smoothly, how involved would you get with the band setting up and making sure the performance goes okay on their end, or is that their domain and you will only do as they need, basically?
Our role, Harry was always the one that dealt with the bands and stuff more so, like in terms of actual contact. So what we do, obviously, we bring them down, we secure the venue, and we like pay for all of that, and then we like give guarantees to the bands of how much they're going to get paid or whatever, and then they basically tell us what sort of setup they need, and then what stuff they're bringing for that setup. So a band like that generally won't be touring with their own drum kit or anything. They'll have like cymbals and snare, but they won't have like the kick drum or the toms or anything. And usually like amps and stuff. If they've got a combo, they might bring it, but usually bands will bring their head, but they won't bring a cab. So it's our job to kind of source that as well. Usually venues have it, so it's usually quite an easy job, but sometimes shit goes wrong and you've got to source it from somewhere else. But yeah, that's our job basically, is just to set up to make sure bands can play and that they want to play because we're giving them money.
So how would you secure a drum kit if the bands need a drum kit?
If it all went tits up, usually you just ask mates. If the venues didn't have one and the band couldn't bring one, you'd just ask a mate. So we, when my first band, RIP, played our first show, we found out a week before that we didn't have any guitar amps. Our guitarist didn't have any amps, and then also our drummer only had cymbals, didn't have a snare or anything. So I found that out like a week before, so I just had to source around with mates. So yeah, it can be like stressful if it's really like last minute shit like that, but generally all this stuff is organized in advance so that it's less stressful.
Yeah, fair. Sounds really stressful but rewarding, mate.
On our level, it's
Going
not.
from what you
It's not
say.
so stressful. There's not a massive like investment from us. I know. I'm good friends with like some of the promoters around Cardiff. Like I said, this band Loathe, that came through my friends, Ethan and Rich from Tone Deaf Creatures. Shout out to them as well. They put Loathe on, which is their like biggest show, and that sounded like a fucking nightmare. And there was way more money than me and Harry had ever put into a show. There was way more at stake for them, and I think that was quite stressful for them. But it did go really well. So yeah, I can't really comment on how stressful it is because it's always been quite easy from our perspective.
Yeah, fair play. I'm sure you'll get back into it, mate. I think you've got too much of a big passion for music to not participate it to some extent.
I'd like to. I just got other stuff I want to focus on at the moment. I would like to do it because I like I said, that feeling of like that you're cultivating the local scene and interest in local music that's probably the most rewarding thing about it, to be honest.
Yeah. What have you got? Would you be willing to share on some other projects you've got going on, or are they too early?
So I'd tell everyone, to be honest. I got like a couple of things going on. I've got one band that is in like the demoing stages. We've done a few practices. That's just like a straight hardcore band. And then my first band is effectively getting back together, but with some lineup changes. So we're trying to make that work at the moment. Okay. With the corona and all that, it's difficult because we're all in different places. So it's quite difficult to organise, but the seeds are being sown as we speak. So hopefully when we get back, stuff can keep going.
Yeah. Cool. That sounds cool, man. I'm sure you'll be playing forever. So it's really cool to see anybody participate in any passion project and at least try. I think is always a nice sign that a lot of people dream about it, don't do anything about it. A lot of people talk a lot of shit, don't do anything about it. But I think even people who try and fail still try.
Yeah, exactly. If you put the effort in and fail, then at least you can say you tried it.
For sure, man. So your parents, we lived near each other. We grew up in the same schools, and then your parents moved to Germany, I think, for your dad's work. So how did you feel about that?
So that happened when I was like 17, 18. So we were in year 13. And
you'd already moved slightly away, haven't you? You already moved from a local village to like a village down the road sort of thing.
So we both grew up in Norfolk, obviously. So we both lived kind of close to Norwich. And then when I moved to basically the other side of the city. So it basically like my journey to school went from 10 minutes to an hour and a half, which was real shit.
Oh Christ!
Yeah, and that was. I remember like when my parents told me they wanted to move, I was super up for it, and I was like, "Yo, that's it! I get to live in Germany. That's gonna be so cool." And then everything happened really quickly. I think quicker than any of us expected it to. So we moved to the other side of the county, basically, right in like November when I was in year 13. So it was like right in the middle of like mocks and stuff, and it was just like full A-level shit, and I was thinking about uni and stuff. And then all of a sudden I was miles away from school and I didn't have any friends, and I really hated it. And I was like that typical 17, 18-year-old, like just asshole. So I was just an asshole to my parents, and like I just really didn't want to move or anything. I just fucking hated everything at that point. We're all good now. It's all good. So I'm in Germany now and I'm chill with it. But yeah, at the time I really hated it, and especially that summer. So the summer between sixth form and uni was like, obviously it's like your last summer with your mates that you grew up with before you sort of move away. And you know, everyone's just turned 18, so you know, everyone's like going out and everyone's basically just doing what they want because you're 18 and you can. And then I was like, you know, 500 miles away in another country. And the only thing I came back for was Reading. That was like the only thing about that summer I think I can really remember is Reading.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, did you work over the summer? Is that where all the time went? Or did you just hang out?
Not that summer. I think I just spent a lot of time sulking in my room, as like an 18-year-old does. But no, I didn't get a job in Germany until like the next year, because obviously I did go to uni in the UK, and I'm here for like with my parents during the virus, but so I live in Cardiff like full time now. So I went to uni in Cardiff and would come back to Germany in the summers.
And do you now enjoy spending time in Germany, or is it still a sore spot for you?
It depends how long I'm here for, because where my parents live it's essentially like retirement country. It's all like countryside, and there's like vineyards, and it's a real nice place, don't get me wrong. The weather's like pang, like all the time. Like even if it's snowing, you're like, this is sick.
Yeah.
But it's really slow, especially when you're used to living in the city with your mates and doing stuff all the time. Like in Cardiff, there's always something to do. Like even on the shittest night, you can always find something to do with people. But here, it's just dead. And like it shows because the nearest city to us is Trier, and it's meant to be the like oldest city in Germany or the oldest city in Europe or something, and it shows it's dead.
Yeah, to be fair, every time you come back to Norwich, you know, you are super busy, as am I, because we have to fit in meetings, people to see, things to do. So whenever you're down there, it's like a full-on engagement plan of, you know, from 8 till 12, I'm pretty much stacked.
Yeah.
But I kind of like that because you manage to see everyone or as many people as you can. I'm pretty sure, Ben, last time I went out in Norwich, I feel like it was with you and Leash and Rosie and Fran and that, and we had a blast. I don't know if you were there or not. Maybe I'm making it up.
To the waterfront. I remember that.
That was a blast.
Yeah, man. It's like obviously because I miss like a lot of going out in Norwich, to be honest, because of moving here. But every time I go back now, I still love it. It's like if you go to the right places, there's some like shit clubs there. But
yeah. So I guess, mate, what are you doing? How are you? I know last time we spoke, you were watching a lot of films. You watched any more films lately?
Not much since we spoke, to be honest. I went on when I was still locked down in Cardiff before I came back, I went on like a Scorsese binge. So I was just watching loads of like mob films, which was cool.
What's so funny?
Yeah, so I watched
What?
I watched Goodfellas for the first time, and I can't believe I hadn't seen it before.
Fantastic
and
film,
then
mate.
I think I was saying to you before, I followed it up like a day later by watching Casino, and it's essentially the same film, just a little bit longer and set in Las Vegas. So it was kind of like
Longer than Goodfellas?
by like half hour, I think. So
Crikey.
I was kind of like zoned out for a
God.
lot of it. I wish I'd watched it like completely separately. I probably will go back to it.
Yeah.
And then I tried to watch The Irishman, but I got like halfway through and I realised I wasn't really paying attention, but because it was kind of slow. So I want to give it another go because I've heard it's real good.
Yeah, fair. We put some movies in the hat and mixed up the names, so we're picking out movies out of the hat. So we watched quite a few films we haven't seen before. Erin Brockovich with Julie Roberts, which was great. India and her sister watched Les Mis for the first time, which was great. I really enjoyed it as well. Had a few beers. It was quite.
I saw a post on Reddit. Someone had bought it was like a scratch off poster of like the top 100 films on IMDb or something.
Oh, mate. You're talking about literally the poster I've got next to me.
What, it's like
for Christmas like 3 years ago.
Oh,
yeah,
sick.
man.
Yeah. Well, I saw like.
I'll send you a picture.
Yeah, I saw that on Reddit, and I was like, "That's such a good idea," because a lot of the top 100 films I haven't seen.
They're to be fair, I've seen a fair few films, but I've only done probably about 60% of the poster. So probably will scratch a lot of the rest off over the coming weeks. But yeah, it's an interesting time for sure. To be fair though, for creators like ourselves, you could argue it's been the best opportunity ever in the last 50 years to be able to do what you want with minimal, I guess, financial and physical impact, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. My only thing is because, at this point, I'd like to be demoing songs and stuff on my laptop, but because I flew over here, I couldn't bring all of my stuff. So essentially, all I've got is an acoustic. So the way I'm having to work it is write these like heavy songs on an acoustic and then try and imagine how they sound, send them to my guitarist, and then hopefully he sends them back and it sounds okay. Otherwise we have to keep having this back and forth and it takes forever.
Mate, you might find that process makes some genius metal songs. So. Maybe that's a process that bands need, right? Like it's a different
There's a
process.
band that we both like that we take heavy inspiration from called Trophy Eyes. Their like first songs, they kind of cross like hardcore and pop punk and like metalcore as well. Their like first EP I found out was apparently written on acoustic. They wrote it all on acoustic and then they demoed it with like electric. Yeah, and it sounds slamming. So yeah, it depends how much they've changed it from the acoustic.
Fair.
Some of the stuff we've done is pretty good. I can sort of hear how it sounds. So,
mate, I want to talk to you about idols because I love idols. I feel that they have an energy that a lot of rock fans are missing. And see, for me, when I look at idols, I'm like, they should be minimum main stage, like throughout the day, in terms of their status at a festival lineup. Maybe headline second stage, right? But I just don't see that reaction from the organizers, and I'm thinking, like you say, Lil Pump, but not idols.
Yeah, my idols are like blown up. Their second album, that's the one I found out about. I'm not going to claim to be like some old school fan, and I don't even like listen to it that much. Yeah. But that their second album,
Joy as an Act of Resistance.
Yeah, that album is real good. Yeah.
Real good.
I've seen their like Glastonbury set, and that looked insane. So I'd love to see them live whenever they come through.
I'd loved his comments on saying that there is no humility here. No, it was something like we're not going to pretend that this isn't the biggest deal of our career, of our lives. And I was like, that's a magnificent thing to say, because that's exactly how I would feel if I was them.
Yeah,
and I don't think you get many bands
they
saying
have a
that.
lot of really, at least the singer does, a lot of really cool, just like opinions on punk music and fame and stuff. I remember I was watching a video. There was an interview with them. They were being interviewed by some students from BIM in Bristol, and they were talking about how they supported Foo Fighters, I think at one of their London shows or something.
Recently?
I think it might have been like a couple of years ago, like a year ago or something.
Okay.
But they were saying how they basically there was like a pool of bands that got offered the support slot, and it was essentially like they had to compete for it in a way. And then they had real debates about whether they should do it, whether it would like alienate a lot of their fans. And they ultimately decided that the best way to get, in that kind of Rage Against the Machine way, they always had this argument as well, is that the best way to get their message out is to do it on that massive platform, like regardless of the consequences of people's opinions and stuff. And he's got some real good thoughts about that. And one of my favorite stories that they've told is how they got that support slot is they took a picture of, it was like the drummer or guitarist like in his pants, and made a jigsaw and then sent it to Dave Grohl. And, and like he was like holding a sign in this picture that said, "Let us support you" or something. And they did it, and then that's how they got the support slot. They said Dave Grohl a jigsaw, and they like guitarist in his pants.
That's so cool. I'm pretty sure one of the guitarists plays in his pants. Like
the guy's
show,
like a dentist, I think,
or at least
the drummer. One of them's like a dentist.
That is mental. From what I was reading on Wikipedia, mate, it sounds like they were pretty much going as a band on the side for years and years, and then an impactful emotional event happened or something creatively happened, and they've just kind of shot. And I imagine from their point of view, they are freaking out right now.
Yeah, from my understanding,
like breaking through at like 35 plus. Like
they are all kind of old, aren't they?
It just shows that you can never quit.
Yeah, so they, from my understanding, I think it was it the lead singer's mum died or something? I saw like the first album's about, and I think that's what brought them loads of attention. And then the new album was just really good, and also had some good messages and stuff on it. It's interesting because I feel at the moment like I'm at that point where I've just turned 24, and I'm almost I've been talking to like my parents about it, and they like laugh it off in a way, but I feel like I'm going through some kind of quarter life crisis or something, and I believe it's a real thing. Because I'm at like 24, I've just finished uni, I'm thinking about what I want to do next. I've settled on music, but at the same time I'm like, am I too old to do this? Am I ever gonna like be able to do it as a career? Because I'm in terms of like this game, I'm like knocking on for like the kind of stuff I'm into. But then there's like bands like Idols, and there's other bands that I listen to, especially in like hardcore, that get big. They get to like a level where people have heard of them and people come to their shows, and they're like older than me. So I am in like two minds about it. I do believe in this sort of quarter life crisis thing, and it's been something that's really like, I don't know, just been really affecting a lot of like my choices lately, perhaps in a negative sense. But
is there a fear that you'll either not break through, or it will be a waste of time, or you're not sure about it?
I think it's a lot of thing. I think it's something that a lot of like creative people that try to pursue that as a career go through. And I think it's because when you choose that sort of career, you take a knock in terms of the script of life. You sort of throw that out because a lot of people will, just leave school, get a job, and then they get to like our age, like 24, 25, and we'd see it all the time on social media. A lot of people we went to school with, they're getting married and they're getting a house and stuff.
Having
and
kids,
that can be quite like distracting. And you think, I'm 24 and, look at me, I still work in a bar. You know what I mean? Like, so sometimes it's easy to get distracted and think, oh, maybe I made the wrong choices. But, I think ultimately those people did that because they wanted to do that. A lot of people buy a house at 24 because they want a house and they want to live with their partner and they want to have kids and they want to do all that. But then there's other people that make another choice, and it can be in anything. It's not just in creative stuff. People make choices because they decide, oh, I want to do what I want to do, so I want to go traveling. And again, if you go traveling for a year, that's probably going to knock at least like 2-3 years off of that plan. You know what I mean? So I think,
man,
I think it's like I said, it's easy to get distracted and almost lose faith in yourself because you see other people going along that what is deemed as successful. But I think you've got to keep doing stuff for yourself at the same time. I think you got to remember why you're doing it, and if you make a choice to follow a creative career, it's because you want to do it, and it's what you really want to do. So I think it's important to keep that belief and keep believing in yourself in that sense.
Yeah, for sure, man. I think that's quite potent what you just said, because like you say, it's like any decision you make, as you say, interrupts the script of life. But then realistically, anyone who makes a breakthrough in any particular field probably won't be following that script, I imagine, or will trail off at some point. And also, you never hear about the people who are able to sustain all of those things and be good at it. And you're right, we're kind of taught that you should want this at this sort of age, and you should be kind of here at this age. And it's really frustrating and exhausting because at the same time, the same person say, oh, you should do what's happy, you should do what makes you feel good. And you think, nah, this ain't right, because you're telling me two different things here, because what makes me happy puts me off the script. So you just kind of, as you say, you have to blur out the noise, blur out the false prophets, blur out the non-believers, and just focus on what you're doing and forget what other people's plans are. And at the end of the day, believe that you want to do what you want to do, and it's making you fulfilling what you need to do, and that's the only thing you can do, really. There's no point in getting a house and wife and kids to have a midlife crisis at 48, be divorced, and be back to square one.
That's what I mean. I think that's why people have the midlife crisis, is because they do settle into that, and then they think, I haven't lived. You know what I mean? I've just been working for 30 years. Like, it's like, it's not saying that, having, like, being married and, like, having the kids or whatever and having the house, it's not to say that doesn't make you happy, but, like, ultimately, I think people are going to, people have that midlife crisis because they think, I haven't done anything, I haven't traveled. And I think it's quite interesting looking at my parents moving out here, because obviously in Europe, you can drive everywhere. If you've got the willpower, you can drive, across the continent if you want. And since my parents have moved here, they're both in their 50s. I'm sure they won't mind me saying that. They're both in their 50s, but they're traveling more than they ever have. And they, I think last year before, they drove to Croatia for a holiday. They'd driven down to Switzerland, which is only like 4 hours away. You can like get anywhere. Wow. So I think, whether they had that midlife crisis or whatever, I think they're over it, and now they're starting to live now that they're approaching retirement.
Yeah, and they're happy to pursue that, of course. It's it reminds me of my mum and dad a bit, actually, where, like you say, they're traveling more than ever, and they're at the same time fulfilling very pointless and menial tasks which keep them occupied and keeps them busy. And they're now gone from having 2 children in the house and an absolute chaotic life, so to speak, to 2 people on their own, available, every weekend to do whatever they want.
Exactly, and you've got to you reach that point where you're just working to fund that. You know what I mean? Like, and I know like your dad owns his own business, and your mum as well. They're both like self-employed.
Yeah.
Like my parents aren't, but they're at that stage where they're not looking for like promotions or anything like that. You know, they're looking to build the pension, and they're just looking to fund their lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to argue at some point. I think there is an argument to say that you work for work's sake, but of course you work to supply the necessities of life. And like you say, at some point it has to come to terms with the fact that I'm working so I don't have to work. That's kind of being the goal here, or the purpose for some people. I think that I fear what our interests will change to as we get older. For example, I fear the day when going to a supermarket will be my daily activity. And, you know, I talk about who's moved next door for 3 months because I'm so interested in it. I fear when I'm that old or that bored that I'll be interested in those things.
It's weird, isn't it? Because growing up, you always look at like your grandparents and you think they're boring. They live a boring lifestyle. And then now I'm at like, I'm like in my 20s, and I look at my parents and I think they're becoming my grandparents, and they just talk to each other about just shit, and I'm like, what are you on about? Like, but then at the same time, I'm probably going to reach that point as well, where like, you know, that is what I talk about with people, you know.
Yeah, it's a sad existence. Oh dear. Yeah, man. I want to just kind of finish, if that's okay, talking about some real nerd stuff, because I won't speak for you, Ben, but I'm a huge nerd, geek, whatever, and I love Star Wars. We both love Star Wars, both love Lord of the Rings, blah blah blah. And it's interesting growing up in this environment, actually, because I think those things have pretty much lost all their serious stigma at this point, and people now are just kind of on board with it or just accept it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was obviously like, we went around when Star Wars first came out, but just from like what you gauge, if you were big into Star Wars or Star Trek or whatever, you were a fucking loser back in the day. But I think I think now, like, obviously kids are into it, but if you were like an adult or whatever who was into Star Wars, you know, that was like what the fuck are you doing? But I think now, especially with like the internet and stuff like that, because you can communicate so easily with other fans, and it's all in like a public forum, I think that's why there is less stigma. And there's other factors to it, you know, like these big studios that produce films that everyone loves, you know, like Disney will produce their Disney films, but then they're also like, oh, here's Star Wars and, you know, comic book movies. People are like, oh, these are like cool to like.
Yeah, for sure. But what are your thoughts, man, on the extension and inevitable downfall? Because every peak needs to trough. Is that
no,
the right word? I don't know. What is your thoughts on the idea of expanding these identities and concepts, you know, of a franchise to the point where there is an inevitable downfall rather than finishing on a high, so to speak? As a fan of these things, as a creator yourself, what are your thoughts on that?
I think let's take, for example, I think the big one you can talk about with this is probably Marvel, right? I would say that Marvel has probably had its peak now with Endgame. I haven't been into like any of them since like Captain America 2, to be honest, but I think Marvel's probably had its peak at this point. The whole main story that everyone from the very beginning has now come to an end, and you know, they're trying to do other stuff now.
Yeah.
And they're trying to like spread it into like multimedia. Obviously, like the comic books are like the OG, but now they've got like the TV shows and there's games and there's, you know, all sorts of shit. I think from that kind of size thing, especially something owned by Disney, like the biggest like media company in the world, I feel like they're probably aware that it's had its peak, but now they're just trying to grab as much of that last, honey from the pot, the Marvel pot. They're trying to just make as much money from it as possible before no one cares anymore. So I think on that kind of scale, on like a huge like media monopoly standpoint, there's like that capitalism element where it's just trying to make money. But I think if you look at it from like an individual creator, I think there is a point where you reach your peak and you probably know when you're in it, and you're probably like, this is it now. Like, and then you just sort of coast downhill for the rest of it. But I don't think that means you should give up. I don't think you should just wrap it up. Like, I think if you're in it for that same like Disney reason as let's try and make as much money as this so I have something to retire on, I think perhaps that's the wrong reason. But I don't know, if like the popularity isn't there but the passion's still there, then why not carry on?
Yeah, man. It's interesting because I see it as a forum or tool for individual creators to exercise their creative ability in. So while the franchise of Star Wars may be on a downfall and overall maybe on a downward trajectory in terms of popularity, in terms of ticket sales, etc., individual creators are able to create in that universe for the first time. And that is an expression of people who may be in their peak. Like J.J. Abrams, looking back, maybe Force Awakens might have been his peak. I think people will perhaps argue that. And it's interesting to see how these franchises can facilitate those creative individuals and help them produce different ideas within these universes. But then the universes themselves be on a downward trajectory. But yeah, like you say, man, there's a difference between cash grabbing and creating and doing it because you love it.
I think you make an interesting point with the creators being able to get involved. I think Star Wars is obviously still on that massive level, and I think Star Wars will always be on some kind of massive level. But like, I think it's good that you can get these people in, but then the more niche it becomes, I feel like as it becomes more niche, there is still going to be more opportunity for like even smaller creators. So it's going to like boil right down eventually to like, I don't want to say the lowest level of creator, but the creators with the least exposure. Even to like, I don't know, someone who's just making videos on YouTube or something could probably add something to the Star Wars universe eventually. So yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, exactly. And who would have thought that arguably the best film to come out, I know you probably disagree with this, mate, but the best film to come out of the new Star Wars films would be a spin-off about how the spies stole the plans for the Death Star. Or at least one of the best. I mean, a film without Jedi in it, who would have thought that? No one. I wouldn't have thought that. I didn't like the sound of a film without Jedi in it from the start. But they proved us all wrong, and I think it's one of the best they've made, one of the most original they've made.
I think it's because it shows more. Obviously, it's still within that like Skywalker saga or whatever, but I think it just shows more of other stuff that's going on. Part of what appeals to me about stuff like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and that is the little side bits. Whenever I'm like online, and if I don't necessarily read all the like expanded universe stuff, but if I'm going through like the Star Wars wiki or Star Wars wiki or whatever, Wikipedia, part of what interests me is reading about those smaller characters and just shit that's going on outside of that main storyline.
Yeah, for sure. My question to you, Ben, is how are the Lord of the Rings films that good, genuinely? Because when you look at them on paper, they should be awful. And somehow, not only are they good, they are some of the best
films ever
made.
If they were made today, they would be ass. And I think The Hobbit shows that. And I think...
Interesting.
At the time, I don't think people realised it then, especially compared to now. I feel like Lord of the Rings, while it had that big studio back in, it was almost like a passion project. Whereas I think now...
Yeah.
I think the studios would have so much of a hand in it they'd be like, oh, you can't do that, you can't do that. And if you think of in Lord of the Rings, especially like the extended editions, that even though they weren't like released in cinema, they were still released. All the stuff that they had and the story that they managed to put together, it's like nowadays you'd be like I said, oh, you can't show that. What's the point in that? Like, no one cares about that. Whereas I think back then it was made as like we want to make a Lord of the Rings story because we like Lord of the Rings and we need a good adaptation.
Yeah, man. And when you look at it, at the premise of it, of this Peter Jackson guy who I think at the time only made like horror indie film or like indie small films, his first big scale film, actors that we've never heard of, with a story that a lot of people know from the books. It's all set up to fail. And it genuinely takes my breath away at how good those films are when you look at how bad they could have or should have been.
It's the same with Game of Thrones, man. You look at that and you think at least in the first seasons, you think the amount of recognizable actors in that, is pretty few and far between. And you think it's this high fantasy thing and it's super in depth and it's also like R-rated.
Yeah. Lots of conversations.
Yeah, it's R-rated as well, which, automatically puts, a lot of people off. But it was like a runaway hit. How it ended is beside the point. But when it started, it was,
Yeah, completely agree, mate. When you look back on episode 1 of Game of Thrones, you're thinking, how did anyone get on board with this? They're talking about things I have no idea what they're talking about. There's about 15,000 characters to follow. They're talking about so many different aspects. I mean, the tease at the very first scene of the show ends up being like fulfilled in season 7 or whatever it is. Like you say, it shouldn't ever have really gotten as popular as it did, but somehow it did. Somehow.
And then I think how it ended, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about how Lord of the Rings wouldn't work now because there's too much studio involvement. Obviously when they started, they were sticking to the source material as closely as they could. Obviously they omitted some parts and changed others to make it, palatable for TV. But as soon as they left the source material behind, it got shit. They didn't have, they didn't have the imagination, and they didn't have,
man.
They just couldn't pull it off.
And it's funny because I don't know whether this is true, but from what I can tell, the Marvel films are popular because they have the creative freedom. Now, I'm not saying they're not tethered to. They're not bound by their creative freedom, because in their creative freedom, they've actually set rules and structure for themselves. So, for example, some films have to follow certain formulas or have certain things happen because the future films need it to. But for the most part, it seems like a lot of the success is down to the fact that Disney kind of say, hey, we're going to give you the financial backing you need. If anything serious happens, we will get involved. However, we're going to let you do these films how you think they should be done because you know best. At least that's how it feels.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you see the end product and you think, well, yeah, that makes complete sense because they're doing things that make sense to the characters. And that's a lot of the decisions that the studio wouldn't get right.
Yeah, I think if you were to ask someone to, like if I was to ask you right now to explain to me the plot of the Marvel films up to Endgame, what you would say to me is probably what the studios had written as well, or what Joss Whedon or whoever wrote it initially is probably what they came up with. But everything else in between that is probably what the individual directors and stuff are taking liberties with. Especially if you look at is it Thor Ragnarok? The one that's like is just on all the material and stuff, it's just got that like 80s kind of vibe and stuff. And it's super like stylistic, and there's a couple of other ones that are also stylistic like that. And that's, sort of, I guess, when the directors are left up to their own devices and the studio is like, is the story in there? Like, yeah, okay, do what you want.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's funny you say that, actually, because Thor Ragnarok for me was one of those moments where they didn't quite, the studio didn't quite know what to do with the Thor film, so they just made a funny Star Wars film, and that is basically Thor Ragnarok. But like you say, it's kind of we're going to leave you to your own devices, and that seems to have the best outcome in terms of the Marvel films. But yeah, man, it's an exciting time to be alive because MCU's changed everything, and the Marvel films are bigger than Star Wars right now, so it's a weird time to be growing up in from that point of view, because who would have thought that anything would be bigger than Star Wars,
Yeah, it is weird.
So I guess
it makes me wonder what like the kids growing up now, when they become like directors and stuff for like big Hollywood stuff, what's that going to look like? Because they've come up on this like expanded universe idea, whereas we didn't necessarily come up with that.
Yeah, man. I think there'll probably be a snapback, like, elastic band effect of films will be going back to just being a film and being a solo project, I imagine, because that is very refreshing to me.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of studios that are bringing that back. Something like A24 or something. Stuff like Midsummer and Hereditary, films like that. They're sort of bringing back that standalone. But yeah, it's weird how it changes. Because obviously, back in the day, like when film started up to probably when they became like a mass media thing, like back in the 70s and 80s, a lot of them were like standalone films. But I feel like when we were growing up, it became more about the trilogy in a sense. I feel like in our lifetimes we had Lord of the Rings, and obviously Star Wars was a thing, but we had new Star Wars, and then we had Lord of the Rings, we had The Matrix. There's all these like trilogy blockbusters, but then from the trilogy it's grown to like, oh, you've got to have a whole world with like characters coming in and out of your film and stuff like that. So I wonder what that's going to evolve into. I'd like to see it go back to like standalone art pieces, if you want to be a bit pretentious about it. But
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it probably relates to the commodity of the film, essentially. Let's sell some external media related to these characters.
That's the thing. If you can keep Iron Man around for 15 years, then you're gonna be selling toys for 15 years.
Exactly. So I lied, Ben. I do want to talk about something else with you. So before we went live, or before we recorded, I should say, you told me you got a Switch Lite, which is awesome. And I haven't bought a Nintendo Switch yet, so I kind of want to... You're a big Nintendo fan. I'm not really a big Nintendo fan. I want you to give me the down low. You've played the top two games on the system, Super Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild. And I think you mentioned you completed Odyssey. So how was that? Have you played a lot of Mario games before?
The last big Mario game I played was Mario Galaxy 1. I never played the second one.
Okay.
But I've always been like a sucker for that kind of 3D platformer. Like probably my favorite game of all time is like Banjo-Kazooie. And again, it's just like a Nintendo thing. It's like their games. So those games never really changed, to be honest. But I feel like a lot of the mechanics in them do. I feel like Odyssey... I don't know, Odyssey was just amazing. It just like took... Yeah, really? Whereas Galaxy was really good because it had all the like weird gravity stuff going on. I don't know, I feel like Odyssey was just like perfected like a 3D platformer. Just all the mechanics in it are great. All the maps in it are there's a few like duds, but for the most part the maps are like amazing. They're super like detailed. There's just so much to do, to like 100% just like one map to get all the moons and whatever. Probably takes you a good like 2.5 to 3 hours, and there's like 11 of them.
And Breath of the Wild has a lot of reputation, and is a game I've never played. So, from what you've played so far, Ben, can you see the justification for that reputation?
Yeah, when I first started playing it, so I've only been playing it for like a week, so I have not scratched the surface, to be honest. But as soon as I started playing it, from like at the start, it's got that kind of like Fallout moment where you sort of emerge from like a bunker into this massive world. And then, I think when I saw that happen, and then like you get in your first like fight pretty much straight away, I was like, this game is sick. This is like next level. And it really is. Again, it's that thing where they've just like just mechanics and stuff of like what an open world sort of RPG like that should be. They've just got it like nailed, like from everything from like the combat to the exploration, because the exploration is a bigger part than the combat, but they've just like nailed it, absolutely nailed it. Everything is climbable. Everything you see, you can reach. It's like literally.
Yeah, I've heard that it's limitless. Yeah, I'm very intrigued. I think I'll have to finish the games I've got in my back catalogue before I invest in a Nintendo Switch. But the idea of a portable console is absolutely a dream come true, and it seems like a great way to play on the sofa. During summer, you just sit outside and play or something like that. It seems like a great investment, but I just can't bring myself to do it right now because I've got other things to play. But it sounds like you really enjoying yourself.
Good. I haven't
which is great.
Had like the chance to be like, oh, I'm taking it out on the road. I'm like that. I've only played it in my house, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I like that I have the option that if I wanted to, I could, take it out somewhere. Just like you used to do with the DS. Like
yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly. And to be fair, I kind of miss a portable console because as a kid, they're like your absolute lifeline when you're going anywhere.